Welcome back. Let's now go ahead and go over some example solutions for your object-oriented programming review exercise questions. Let's begin by creating this sphere class. We'll start off with our init method, def underscore underscore init, and then we always need to pass in self, and we'll go ahead and accept in a radius, which means we need to assign our radius attribute. So we will say self.radius is equal to radius. Then we will create a volume method, and that will also need self. And the formula for the volume of a sphere can be easily found through a Google search, but it's just 4/3 times pi, so we can say 3.14 times, and then we'll say self.radius to the power of 3, or cubed. So it's just 4/3 times pi times r cubed. Then we can define the surface area method. So we will say surface area, we need to pass in self, and similarly we can return 4 times pi, or 3.14, times self.radius to the power of 2. And it's up to you whether you want to create pi as a class object attribute. Here we just set in a constant 3.14 there. But that's all you had to do for the sphere class, so let's run this and check that it all works out. So sphere with a radius of 3, surface area, and volume all check out. So that should have been pretty straightforward, especially that we did a circle class in our previous lessons. Now for exercise 2. This one was definitely a little more complicated, so let's see what we could do here. We're going to start off with an init method, and as described in the instructions, you don't need any parameters here, so we'll just say self, and then we will create an attribute called self rand choice. And self rand choice, what it's going to have is it's going to use that random library that we imported, and then it will use the rand int function that we discussed earlier in your training, and it's going to pick a random number from 0 to 10, and that will set the rand choice attribute. And this is a good lesson to keep in mind. You can still set attributes even though you don't want your user to define them. Then we're going to create a method called reset random, takes in self, and it's going to, we can make a print statement saying resetting random number, and then we just need to reset it. So we can say self rand choice is equal to, and it's the same command because it's a random number, random integer between 0 and 10. So that will go ahead and grab the current value of the rand choice attribute and reset it to a random integer. Then finally, we are going to create the guess method. And this is basically part of the game. So what we need to do here is first grab a user guess. So we'll create a variable called user guess, and we will set that as the input, and we'll just ask for please input a random number. Make sure there's a space there. And remember, this is going to return a string, so we can just go ahead and cast it as an integer right now by wrapping that in the int function. Then we will say if the user guess is equal to our current rand choice, so self.rand choice, then we will print correct. Else, we will print wrong guess. So that's the simplest way you can create this guessing game, just taking an input and then do a comparison here. And we're going to run this and see what happens when we create a guessing game. So we'll create a new guessing game, and let's go ahead and see what our random choice is. So our random choice is 0, and if we reset the random choice and see what our random choice is again, it looks like it's 10. So it looks like that is working. If we ran this reset random again, then we get 4, etc. So it should be constantly changing. And since it's random, you may get the same random number twice in a row. Keep that in mind. And now let's play the guessing game. So we will say g.guess, run this, input a random number. We know it's 4, so let's put in something wrong first, 3, and it says wrong guess. And if we were to run this again and input for the correct value, then it says correct. Perfect. So now let's add in some logic that will help the user for their next guess to say if it's higher or lower. So instead of else here, well, instead of just printing wrong guess, we'll have another set of control flow. We will say if the user guess is less than the rand choice, we'll print wrong, guess higher. Else, we'll say print wrong, guess lower. And we can rerun this, and now let's restart another guessing game. So we can check the rand choice before we actually start the game. Looks like our rand choice is 0. So now let's initiate our game by guessing, and it's going to ask us to input a random number. We'll go with 5, which is purposefully too high, and now it's going to say guess lower. Perfect. So now if we say guess, and we guess the right answer, which is 0, it says correct. So that's all you had to do for that guessing game. Again, the key things to note here is the use of self when referencing the attributes that belong to this class. And the other thing to notice here is that you can still create attributes even if your user doesn't define them. All right, hopefully you did well on that, and we'll see you at the next lesson.